Okay, so this is going to be a little bit different from my usual live streams. I try to do them every Tuesday, but due to the events of this recent weekend, something has been uh, nagging at my mind over the past several days and hours over the past 2 days, and that is so there was two shootings over the weekend, one in El Paso and one in Dayton. The one in Dayton is getting vastly overlooked by a lot of people in the mainstream media, and there are conservatives rightfully calling out the Shooters Association with those on the left, and that's I think they're doing a great job. People like Cernovich, people like Ben Shapiro, the guys at the Daily Wire, and all that sort of thing. They're talking about how the Dayton and actually Matt Christensen and there's several other people who have covered the Dayton shooting and his ties with those on the left. And also, yeah, I saw Hexenhammer video on it as well, where he was talking about the guy's ties to Jared Holt. The thing that keeps bugging me, however, is the El Paso shooter. And there are a lot of people, there are a lot of conservatives, a lot of libertarians who look at this guy and they say, yep, that guy's a right winger. No doubt about it. Right wing. Look, he's he's a white nationalist, right wing. And my contention is there's nothing white nationalist, there's nothing right wing about being a white nationalist. I would actually, my intention for this stream, and hopefully I'll keep this one for about half an hour, and then I'm gonna end this stream and then start my usual stream where I'll talk about kind of a little more lighthearted stuff and throw in some humorous things as well as other topics of the week that have been on my mind. But this one is a little more serious, and I think it needs a little bit more of a dive into what exactly is going on. So, my argument that I will attempt to support as thoroughly as I can in the next 30 minutes or so is that white national white nationalism or white supremacy, either take your pick. To me, they're basically identical, and there's no point in picking one over the other. But white identitarianism, whether that be white nationalism or white supremacy, is not right wing, and in fact, it is contradictory to the tenets, the core tenets of what it means to be right wing. The opposite side of that is that white nationalism aligns more closely with leftist ideology. Now, my contention is not that all leftists are white nationalists or white supremacists. My contention is that if we are going to categorize white nationalism and white supremacy, they should be categorized with like categories, like movements, like ideologies, groups that mirror that particular set of values. And I would say all of those groups fall within the left. None of those groups fall under what we would typically understand as right wing. That is my proposal. So, in order to clarify all of this, I guess before I get into that, there are a lot of very smart people that I follow regularly who have made this mistake when they're talking about people like, oh, yep, oh, they're white nationalists, yep, they're definitely on the right wing. They immediately link those two, and that's I don't know where the idea that white nationalism and white supremacy equals right wing. I've been looking into that. Where does that enter the common knowledge? When did that become circulated? Because looking at history, and as I'll lay out in the next few minutes here, at no point was any major figure who was a white nationalist or white supremacist was a right winger, and at no point has any movement that supports these things been on the right side. In fact, all of the movements against these things have been on the right side. But there's people like Jordan Peterson who have claimed, he associates Nazis with the right wing, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. There, and then this is the one that kind of put me over was so I was this Matt Walsh posted a tweet saying that people are afraid to condemn the El Paso shooter because he was a white nationalist, and we need to come out and say that. And yes, yeah, he was a white nationalist, he was a white supremacist, but why would anybody on the right, anybody who is on the conservative side, anybody who is not a crazy leftist, why would anybody have any fear of calling this guy the white supremacist that he is? Because all of them should know that white supremacy does not belong on the right. People on the right should oppose any form of racial racial identitarianism. And what I mean by this is not just, oh, there are no races. No, you recognize race. Yeah, you see somebody who is black. Yes, you recognize, yes, they're a black person. They have a history of being black. They're from, their ancestry dates back to Africa. You acknowledge race, but you don't identify someone as in, you don't judge them by their race. You say this person is this person who happens to be black. It is a secondary characteristic, or as Dennis Prager has defined it, it's basically the same as eye color. Yes, this person has brown eyes or blue eyes. Okay, this person has black skin, or is from, maybe this person has an Asian ancestry. Oh well. It's the same. It should be treated no different from hair color and eye color. It's a physical attribute or characteristic, and it has no further impact on who that individual is. Because you can have somebody who is black, who is a criminal, terrible scourge on society. You can also have somebody who's black who is goes out of his way, extremely charitable, the nicest guy around. Their race has no play in that. It is all personal decisions, and you don't look at as a group of people and say, oh, well, that person's black, he's a terrible scourge on society, get rid of him. And you also wouldn't say the same thing about, oh, that person's white, obviously he's a good person and nothing, he can't do any wrong. Because this is the thing that I didn't understand, and I mean, we did weeks on this when talking about the Richard Spencer versus Styx versus Sargon on this, when it's like, why would people like Richard Spencer look at the situation and think, oh, I'd rather have some white bread, hillbilly guy with missing teeth and who thinks his sister is the hottest woman on the planet over an intellectual black person. That's what Richard Spencer wants. Like, oh, that guy's white, I'll pick him over there. Like, if you were picking a team to build a nation out of, Richard Spencer would just pick all the people that are white and his team would lose. I would go through and pick, I was like, okay, this guy I want on my team, he follows the law, he's an upstanding citizen, he builds his own business, he's an entrepreneur, he's got a good American spirit, he wants to build things and do things for himself. Doesn't matter if he's black or white, doesn't matter if he's Asian, doesn't matter. Hey, this is the kind of guy who embodies the American spirit. He's on Team America. This guy, yeah. So the race for me wouldn't be it wouldn't be an influence. It wouldn't be a factor in this. It's not like I've got a white guy and a black guy. Well, the white guy's kind of a deadbeat. He sleeps on he lives in his parents' basement playing video games and eating Funyuns all day. But that guy has a Harvard degree. He's a well-known lawyer. He's also a brain surgeon. But he's black. That's Richard Spencer's plan. Richard Spencer's plan is like, screw that guy. He's black. I'd rather have the guy who sleeps on his couch because he's white. That's the white. That's what racists think. They think race should be held above everything else, which is just completely ludicrous. It's a completely arbitrary factor. And like I said, with eye color and hair color, it'd be like saying, oh, I only want blonde hair, blue-eyed people on my team. If you're building a team to play basketball, it's like, well, what if all the blonde-haired, blue-eyed guys suck at playing basketball? It doesn't matter, they're the best because they're blonde-haired, blue-eyed. That's the same mentality of being that is what racists think, and it goes to the other side as well. I guess maybe I'm getting a little too much into it, but so let's define the core principles of what the right wing entail and what the left wing entail. So I've got this chart pulled up, and I think this is a mostly accurate. There are things here and there that I will disagree with about this chart, but I think it it's a general idea, and it generally embodies a lot of the things that make these two separate these two categories when it comes to the U.S. So the left, you've got communism, labor, Democrats, and on the right, typically Republican, conservative. Libertarians sometimes go down the middle, although I would argue that libertarian is primarily on the right. There are left libertarians, but in my experience, all the people who are left libertarian, they're pretty much just commies who don't want to admit they're commies. So, it's to me, in my experience, the groups that I've talked to, like that are left libertarian, are actually communist under a different name. Okay, so leftists are progressive in nature. I see that doesn't looks to the future. What? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I guess because they're comparing it with the right, looks to the past. But then there's that phrase, and I say it as a joke, but I'll say the full. Those who refuse to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And yes, that is the case. Where people on the left, they may look at history as just, as they simplify their version of history as like, oh yeah, Orange Man bad, Nazi bad, but they never understand. Okay, what was the root cause? What led up to these events? Because if they had, they would actually learn to stop repeating those mistakes. And instead, I guess they do look to the future in that they have this utopian view of the future. Is like, yes, if we just, this is what I want. I want a world where there is no violence, where there is no wrong, where everybody is sick, or everybody is free from sickness, where everybody is healthy, where everything is good, where everybody has everything that they could ever want. That's not... and this is something I heard, I think, Michael Knowles talk about. The word utopia, I think it was Michael Knowles, or I think it was one of the guys from the Daily Wire at least. Utopia means nowhere. As in, it's a place that doesn't exist. It exists only in your fantasy. It's not real. And getting to a place where there is no sickness, or where everybody gets to do whatever they want, that's not the world we live in. That's not founded in reality. So, so I guess my contention with this looks to the future, it should be, conservatives are a little more realistic. It's like, yes, we understand that we live in a real world with limitations. How do we get the best use out of what we currently have? And they do look to the future. It's not like right-wing don't, screw the future. No, that's somebody else's problem. That's kind of what this... So like I said, there's some subtle things that I don't like about this particular chart, but I think it covers the main core principles fairly well. Okay, so egalitarian, this is over here on the left, and again, this is a point of contention that I have with this particular chart. I think that egalitarianism is actually contradictory to the left's core tenets. Because I think the only way you can have egalitarianism is with right-wing principles. And I'll get to that in a second. So, yes, idealism, yes, that is definitely a left-wing factor, and that's what I was talking about with the utopia future of, everybody, we all live on clouds and, this fantasy land. And equality. So this is another area where I have contention with this chart, but it's more of a contention, and I can see why this would be on there though, because this is a claim that the left always make, is they want equality. It's always the claim, but let's see if I can. Who's that author? So this is from. So this is something I looked up recently. Man, I'll have to. Yeah, give me a second here to look this up real fast. It was Children of Dune, if I'm not mistaken. this is the quote. Yeah, Frank Herbert. Sorry, couldn't remember. So this is the quote. And so I had a kind of an argument with somebody on Twitter, kind of going over some of these principles. But so the left says that they want equality, but historically, this is how it nearly always plays out when the left say that they want equality. When I am weaker than you, I ask for freedom because that is according to your principles. When I am stronger than you, I take away your freedom because that is according to my principles. That quote, even though it's a work of fiction, it's from Frank Herbert, and I actually don't know his politics in real life. But in my experience, that quote embodies what the left actually does. They say, oh, we want equal treatment, we want equality, and that's because they're appealing to those on the right who are in power, for the most part in the United States. They're appealing to more right-wing priorities or principles. They say, oh, give us equality, give us equality, give us equality. And then as soon as they get what they want or they get in charge, then they take away that same thing from other people. What they asked for themselves, because they felt, oh, we need this because you guys are we are being oppressed or whatever. As soon as they get in charge, they take that away from other people. So to me, this equality claim is lip service and not genuine about leftists. So liberal, progressive, I kind of agree with both of those terms there. Okay, so going to the right wing, conservative, traditional. Equality. Yes, and so I would say that of these two terms, the left believes in equality of outcome, or at least that's their claim, is equality of outcome. And in order to achieve that equality of outcome, that means taking the people at the bottom and putting them at the top, because then that's how they, for some reason in their mind, that is equality. Is, oh, they're at the bottom right now and right wings are up at the top, and they're like, oh, well, equality would be us being on top for a little while and you guys getting oppressed. That's alright. And when it comes to equality on the right, it is equality of opportunity, equal treatment of everyone within the system. And we've got pragmatism, which is, yeah, we know that you would like to give health care to everybody in the country, but we can't do that. That's not physically possible. So instead, we have to look at what we have and make the best of it. That's pragmatism. Meritocracy. Yes, you get rewarded based on your value, based on your input. We are not rewarding everybody the same, treating everybody equally or fairly according to a right-wing principle, is giving each person what they deserve based on what they have done. The left's version of equality is giving everybody the same thing regardless of their individual effort or individual contribution. It looks to the past. I covered that. Conservative nature. Now, what that indicates in this, as far as taking, there's usually conservation in this instance is not necessarily keeping things the way they are and being opposed to any change. And this is the way it's like the left likes to paint conservative as, oh, you guys don't want to change anything. You guys want to keep things broken and keep things flawed and keep things from getting better. That's not the case. Conservative is conserving what does work, what is good. It's like not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Whereas if you look at what leftists want for the most time, a lot of the things they want to get rid of are things that keep everything stable, keep society from collapsing on itself. They want to get rid of some of these central support pillars. Whereas conservatives is like, hey, before we get rid of something, we need to check why it's there. We need to see, is there something better that can replace it? Whereas the left is just concerned with, well, I don't see a purpose for this, knock it out. Trade, they say fair trade. I don't quite understand what that word, what that quite means. Fair trade, because so the opposite side for the right wing is free trade. I'm like, what would I don't understand what fair is in regards to this, because if you've got free trade, any trade that occurs is going to be fair. I'm not sure what fair is supposed to indicate, because you can have fair trade that isn't free, but who determines what exactly made that trade free? When you have free trade, it's the people participating that decided, yeah, that trade was fair. When you've got this phrase fair trade here, without it being free, without it being voluntary for the participants involved, it seems like it's just going to be, well, it's what I think is fair, not what the people involved think is fair. They support workers, I mean, I guess for the most part. Or at least that's the claim, although they often implement policies that hurt workers in the long run, but it's... okay. Goal, personal freedom. This is, again, an area that I disagree with about this chart. They don't want personal freedom for people to do the wrong thing. They don't want personal freedom for people to do what they oppose. People who do what they're okay with, they're fine with that personal freedom. People who want to be religious and conservative and Christian and have a nice normal family, they oppose that. You have a personal freedom, but why would you work from home, or why would you be a stay-at-home mom? No, you don't have the personal freedom to do that. You should be a career woman. That's not, I mean, they're against those personal choices and all that sort of thing. Focus is on society. I guess that's, I got no real objection on that. Okay, man, this is gonna already cutting way into this time. All right, let me see if I can just cover a couple more principles here. So, like I said, go over this chart, and the link is informationisbeautiful.net, visualization, left is versus right. But let me get to the core beliefs here. One of the things is rights is, when it comes to individual rights. So let me, I guess, see if there's something more that I can cover here. So there is this nationalistic on here, and I'll cover that a little bit later. But there should have been, so they think the family unit is kind of the strongest, or is what they right-leaning people focus on. They focus on individual and the family unit, fixing yourself, stop trying to fix society, get yourself right, then get your family right, then get your community. It starts from you outward. Whereas, for some reason, leftists think, you got to fix everything out there first and then pull it inward. So, when it comes, so here's where I'm one of my main contentions as to why racism is not compatible with a right-leaning value. Because when it comes to right wing, we have natural rights, or it's the belief in natural rights, and those rights cannot be infringed. Whereas the left, they say there are rights, but what they often attribute as rights, people on the left will claim that healthcare is a right, but that's nonsensical, because if healthcare is a right, then that means somebody has to provide it for you. So if you think about this as two people, so imagine one person on a desert island, right? So it's a person, whatever, gets on a boat, gets, storm, they end up on a desert island. With the right wing, you've got natural rights, which is the right to life, the right to liberty, the right of freedom of speech, things along those lines. Guy on a desert island, can he speak his mind without anybody stopping him, throwing him in jail? Sure. Does he have the right to life? Yeah, nobody's going to kill him. Does he have all of the basic right? Yeah. Does your right to liberty? Yeah. Nobody on that island is going to imprison him. He can do whatever he wants with his days on that island. He's free to choose what he does. Now, with the right to life, it's not guaranteed that he's going to live. That's the right to life, is that no one else can kill you. So, but does he have the right to healthcare on that island? He's by himself on an island. If he has some kind of illness and needs to get his spleen removed, and like, oh, excuse me, one healthcare right, please. I'd like to cash in on my right to healthcare. Oh, there's nobody here to provide that for me? Oh, well then it's not a freaking right. Now, imagine if instead of one person, it's two people on that island. Okay, same scenario. Can both people exercise their right to life? Yes. One person tries to kill the other, that's a violation of the right to life. That would be against right-wing principles. Okay. Both people can speak their minds, can have an argument. Okay, nobody's gonna, I mean, as long as they don't imprison each other or lock each other up in cages for saying what's on their mind or giving ideas, okay, not a problem. That's perfectly in line with right wing. Okay, now if healthcare is a right, one of the guys has, like I said, some kind of illness, has to get their spleen removed or something along those lines. Oh, one healthcare right, what does that mean for the other person? It means the other person on the island, because healthcare is a right, must perform the surgery. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's also, if if the one guy who is sick is getting surgery, the other guy cannot partake of the healthcare right. Only one person gets the benefit of the healthcare right. All the other rights that were mentioned, both could participate equally as much as they want to. But when it comes to healthcare, only one person can take advantage of that right. And it's at the other person's expense. Therefore, it is not an actual right. This is something I've talked about on the show before. The only actual natural rights that exist have to be negative in nature, in that these are things people can't prevent you from doing. People can't prevent you from living. People can't prevent you from exercising or from speaking your ideas. People can't prevent you from doing what you want to do with your stuff. People can't prevent you from owning something that you put your hands to, that you built. Those are natural rights that are recognized by right-wing ideology. And that is something that is contradictory to the entire idea of racism, because natural rights are granted to everyone. And if you are a white supremacist or a black supremacist or Indian supremacist or Chinese supremacist or whatever type of supremacist, you would think that you have rights that other people don't. That you get special privileges and nobody else gets. Like, oh, I've got the right to speak my mind because I'm black, and other people who aren't black don't get to speak their mind. That would be a racial supremacist viewpoint. But that contradicts natural rights. They'd be like, oh, no, see, it's all right to kill somebody who's this subspecies, because this is something that happened under Nazis, where they said, oh, the Jews are a subrace, or a subspecies, they're not human, they're subhuman, therefore we can kill them, and that's not a violation of their rights. Right there, you've got a major contradiction to a right-wing core principle of the right to life for every individual, regardless of race. But that fits in line with the left-wing view of rights being privileges that we all agree on. Because that is their view. When they say healthcare is a right, that's something that they all agree that, yeah, I should get that. Well, if they all got together and agreed that, oh, well, we should kill that person because they're of the wrong race, the leftist ideology would be fine with that particular view. As long as enough of the people agree that this person should die because of their race, well, that fits with leftist ideology. That fits with the core values of what they've identified when it comes to rights. Because they've said a right is anything that we all say you should have. And if we all say something, and we all say you don't get this right because of your race, then you don't have it. And that's exactly why you get... So this is what I'm saying is somebody who enacts white supremacist talking points or core values, is that becomes their identity or their mantra, they are contradicting right-wing core values when it comes to natural rights. Alright, there's a couple other things in here. So this is something libertarian writer David Boaz, and I agree with him on this, says he argued that the terms left and right are used to spin a particular point of view rather than a simple descriptors, with those of the left typically emphasizing their support for working people and accusing the right supporting the interest of the upper class, and those of the right usually emphasizing their support for individualism and accusing the left of supporting collectivism. Boaz asserts that their arguments about the way the words should be used often displaces arguments about policy by raising emotional prejudice against preconceived notion of what the terms mean. So, this right here, this is why I wanted to highlight this, is that, yeah, so the left does, they typically use the terms left and right incorrectly, to say, oh, it's just, people who want, who favor corporations over employees or low workers or low skilled workers or, minimum wage and all that sort of thing. But this right here is where right wing, and this is, I think, is the actual, this is this right here, support for the individual, or support for individualism is right wing, and then support for collectivism is left wing. And again, going back to this chart, that's exactly what we're seeing. They say, all of these things that they hold as their core tenets are all about groups. The group thing, it's society. We need to fix society. They look at things as wholes rather than individual pieces of that whole. And then right wing is exactly the opposite. So they're saying, no, individuals. If this individual is a problem, we don't punish the entire group that they belong to. But the left wing will. They say, this person is a right wing, therefore punish right wing. This person is a man and he's white. He did a bad thing, therefore all white men are bad. That's something we've heard the left say in the last couple of months. Oh, look at all white men are bad. We need to ban white men. Or this is something actually what Ilhan Omar was on that news program just a few weeks ago, saying we need to be afraid of all white men. And I'm like, okay, so because some people in the United States who are white and who are male have committed heinous attacks, you judge all people who share those characteristics as if they would be capable of doing the same act. That is a left-wing view of the world, saying, oh, these certain people, so this is, if we took this to another scenario, not just Ilhan Omar and the left, but what the Nazis did, when Nazis said, oh, yes, they had some grievances against members of the Jewish population. Those grievances, going back to Nazis prior to Hitler coming into power and all of that sort of thing. So Germany had lost World War I. They were in massive debt. And there were Jewish bankers that came in and started buying up the property. And they were, they gave out loans for people, and then they would charge people interest on the loans. And it got to the point where the German people could not get out of this massive debt that they were under. And this is one of the points and why when Hitler came into power and what he said he had this hatred for the Jews, I could understand him having hatred for the individuals who were responsible for their debt situation that they were in. But instead, he took it out on the entire group to which those individuals belonged to. He said, you know what, it's not good enough to punish these old bankers who happen to be Jewish. We also need to punish children, wives, parents who had nothing to do with banking, people who just moved into the country and happen to share the same heritage, people who had no hand whatsoever in the current debt that the Germans found themselves in, people who had no relation to it, but they shared the same skin color, they shared the same ethnicity. Let's punish them in addition to the people who might have actually deserved it. Oh, Oh, okay. That's yeah. So for some reason, people would claim that that is right wing. How is that right wing? That's not right wing in any way, shape, or form. At no point. So when it comes to right wing, we criticize Ilhan Omar for what Ilhan Omar has said, not because she belongs to a Muslim and oh, Muslims do this. Has anybody said we should throw her in jail for being being because Muslims have a disproportionate number of people that engage in terrorism? No, we judge her for her individual actions when she says that she supports groups that are in favor of terrorism. When she says she supports Hezbollah, when she supports CARE, these organizations that have close ties to terrorism and support and empathy for terrorism. Yeah, okay, we can judge her by her individual actions. That is a right-wing principle. A right-wing principle, if Hitler was right-wing, he would have looked at the Jewish bankers and said, yes, we're going to judge you and we're going to punish you for what you did to our society. Not punish your family. This is the other thing. This is another thing that left-wingers are doing in the U.S. right now. They have a problem with Tucker Carlson. What do? They target his friends and family. They go to his house and protest outside of his house where his wife and children are, and Tucker Carlson isn't there. It's not a protest against him. They go after the family members of the individual they don't like. What has Tucker Carlson's wife done or said to injure these people? Nothing. Maybe Tucker Carlson said something that they disapprove of, but the family member has done nothing. But that is a left-wing view of the world. They will punish a group for the actions of an individual. Right-wing, it says, no, you are individually responsible for your individual actions. If you are a member of a downtrodden class, it's because of something you did. It's not because of society's punishing you or you had too many obstacles in your way. It's because you could have done something to better your situation and you opted not to. That is how the right wing view the world. How can you get to the point where you are saying you belong to X ethnicity, X race, therefore you are a bad person? How do you get that from right wing tenets? You can't. It doesn't. It's illogically. It's logically inconsistent. Now, don't get me wrong when I go on this full rant here. Individuals can be hypocritical. An individual who is right wing can be a hypocrite. They can be racist while thinking that they are embodying right wing principles. Individuals can be hypocrites. We see this all the time. Ideologies cannot be. Abstract concepts that contradict themselves do not exist. Square circles do not exist. But a person can believe a square circle exists. An individual can convince themselves that they can have a square that is also circular. And so let's drag this out to a further. An individual can believe that we should judge people as individuals, but then also judge people they meet based on that individual's race. That's not a contradiction. The ideology of saying we need to judge people by their individuality, which is a right-wing tenet, because people have individual rights and we can't infringe on anybody's rights. We need to respect everybody has the same rights, and those are natural or God-given. If that is the case, then you can't judge somebody on the actions of another person. If somebody commits murder, you don't put their entire family in jail. You put the murderer in jail. But if the left wing had their way, you committed murder, let's punish your entire family. Because you're a member of that group, and we recognize groups and not individuals. Which viewpoint of the world has more in common with a racist viewpoint? I'm arguing and advocate that the group or that the ideology that puts everybody in a group would, yes, hey, you're a member of the black race and you just committed a crime. All right, that means all blacks commit crimes. That's what a leftist would think based on this, based on everything that they do. They may claim that they are in favor of, we support minority rights and all that sort of thing, but we've seen this time and time again where they say that they are in favor of a minority and they get into power, and when they are in power, they don't help that minority. In fact, they do everything in their power to keep that minority under their boot, under their heel, completely dependent on them. They don't want people to be independent, as they claimed, because then they would lose their power over them. Whereas the right-wing tenant is kind of like, yes, we want you to go out and do things yourself, to be independent, to be a contributing member of society, so that way we don't have to do things for you, and you're no longer a burden on us, and we can go and help some other group, or we can go help somebody else get to that same position, go out help somebody else become independent, be their own. Those are right-wing principles. So the idea that we can have a right-wing... So I guess someone can be a right-winger and be a white nationalist. But the ideologies of white nationalism and right-wing, those ideologies, they don't go well together. The reason an individual can hold both of those ideas is because individuals are not always rational. Individuals can have conflicting thoughts in their head at the same time, as long as they compartmentalize, as long as they never put the two together and be like, wait a minute, I believe in a square that is a circle. Well, as long as it's a square over here and a circle over there, and I never look at the two as a single unit, that's fine. Human mind, you can compartmentalize, you can avoid those inherent contradictions. But ideas themselves must be consistent. And when it comes to consistency, we can point out that white nationalism and right-wing ideology are incompatible. They conflict with each other, they contradict each other's core tenets. But when it comes to the left-wing ideology and white nationalism, no such conflict exists. You can be a leftist and a white nationalist and not have a problem. Now, I was hoping to get all of that done in an hour, and it's been about 45 minutes. Or I was hoping to get all that done in half an hour, and it's been about 45 minutes. There are a couple other examples. I don't think I'm going to go through this whole chart here either, but alright, but I'm going to cite a couple examples, because I mentioned Nazis as well. And when most people talk about right-wing, white nationalists, and how they're right-wing, they refer to Nazis, which doesn't make any sense because they were National Socialists. Socialism, the idea that everybody is a society and should provide for one another, is a left-wing tenet. And if you look at what Nazis did, all right, did they value the individual? No, they did not, because they valued the Aryan race as a group. Hitler believed the Aryan race was superior. Even if you see somebody who is sickly and in a wheelchair, well, they're Aryan, they should be superior. That doesn't make any... superior to what? I guess I'm not going to say... I'm not saying that people who are handicapped or anything are inferior to... It depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about somebody who is going to carry a heavy load back and forth from, a mile a day... Somebody in a wheelchair, not a good candidate for that. But Hitler would be like, oh, well, this guy is an Aryan. I don't care if... Well, actually, Hitler kind of opposes that as well, because he did kill the people who weren't completely whole. When it comes to the Nazi concentration camps, they killed Jews, they killed blacks, they killed homosexuals, they killed... the effeminate, they killed people who were, deformed or handicapped or mentally inferior. Yeah, everybody who didn't fit their ideal of what an Aryan should be. Yeah, they killed a bunch, not just Jews, they killed a bunch of other people as well. But if Hitler's idea was that the Aryan race was superior, he would take an Aryan person who is lazy, doesn't want to work, sits on their butt, sleeps in their parents' basement, over a black individual who is outgoing, who is doing more than is required of him, Hitler would say no to the black guy and say yes to the Aryan guy. Hitler also wanted socialized medicine. That is something Germany, he was proposed under his rule as German. I don't know if it actually was implemented. I'll have to double check that later, but I don't want to take time because this has already gone on way longer than it should have. I'm pretty sure. So I think socialized medicine was something. Oh man, now I'm gonna have to look it up. Have socialized healthcare. I'm not sure if that was actually implemented. I know it was something they wanted to implement. I'm not sure if this is a good source. Yeah, I'll have to look that up later. Alright, so I know Hitler socialized. So like, there's people who commies will look at Hitler and say he wasn't a socialist because the word privatization was introduced under the Nazis' control. But if you look at it, if people own their own property, you don't need privatization. It's just private property. When people have their property confiscated and made public and then given back to them, then you have privatization. It's taking what Nazis did is they confiscated all the industries, all the personal property was now all your stuff belonged to us. Everything became property of the government as a whole. Then, when they started to have a decline in specific industries, then and only then did they decide to privatize them again. Or introduce privatization in certain sectors, because those were sectors that they needed in order to keep the war effort going. And so they sold them off to the highest bidder and took them from public property and turned them into private property. But prior to them becoming public property, they were already private property. So the only reason privatization comes into play is because goods that should have been private were publicized or made public, and then because that failed and would have led to a complete economic collapse and a complete, it would have led to the war effort being completely undermined. So rather than doing that, they decided, okay, well, we can afford to re-privatize these specific industries. And people and stupid communists will look at that and be like, oh, see, look, Nazis weren't socialist. That's something you could say for every type of socialist system that has been in existence. As soon as it starts to collapse or it sees itself, well, then it goes back to what it knew worked, and it re-privatizes a certain industry. This is the same thing that happened in China. China was communist. And actually, I'll use this. Mao Zedong introduced communism, and he was a national socialist as well. He believed socialism for China. He was not a global socialist. He was a Chinese socialist. He wanted socialism in China. And when it turned out, oh wait, socialism is failing and everybody's going to starve to death and my entire empire is going to fall apart, then and only then they give up on some of the core communist principles or socialist principles and start to incorporate capitalism in order to keep their empire from completely collapsing on its own weight. It's the same thing under Germany for the Nazis. When it's looked like, oh, if we continue at this rate, not only are we going to lose the war, our entire country is going to collapse, and they're just going to walk over us with nothing. So, in order to prevent that, they're like, okay, we have to re-privatize some of these industries. We have to return to capitalism, because capitalism is the only system that can keep these things afloat. And they introduced just enough capitalism to keep their society from collapsing completely. And then they're like, okay, whew, now we've got to the point where capitalism can support all of our socialist agendas. So, Nazis were socialists, despite all the socialist disagreement on that, which is a left-wing tenet. They wanted national health care, socialized health care for German population. Now, whether they actually implemented that or not, I don't know at the moment. I'm fairly certain they did actually implement that, but I gotta double check that. That's also a left-wing principle. What did the Nazis do that were right-wing? Where did they ever focus on the individual in that society? Where was the Nazi mantra saying yes, natural rights, individual rights? Where was the focus on the family under the Nazi regime? There was no focus on the family, and that's another thing about this chart where it talks about right-wing principles focusing on the individual and the family unit as the core of society. Nazis didn't like the family unit. They took their children away from the parents and wanted to raise them as soldiers for the country. They basically built indoctrination schools. The other thing is, despite all these people who say that Hitler was a Christian, he outlawed Christianity. Where's the freedom of religion? And actually, one of the more right-wing tenets in the U.S. at least is actually encouraging Christianity. So getting rid of Christianity, so atheism is also a left-wing ideal goal. So you've got the removal of Christianity, you've got the implementation, or at least the desire to implement, national health care, you've got socialism as your economic system, you've got group identity as your focus rather than the individual. What in any of these policies is right-wing? Nothing. Hitler was a left-winger. Doesn't matter if he was nationalist is right-wing. No, this is something the other person I was arguing on Twitter agreed with me. We had right-wing and left-wing nationalists. Stalin was a nationalist. Hitler was a nationalist. Mao was a nationalist. Pol Pot was a nationalist. Castro was a nationalist. Chavez was a nationalist. All left-wingers. Every single one of them was a left-winger and a nationalist. Being nationalist is not left-wing or right-wing, so that's one of those things like this nationalistic thing. The nationalistic thing is not exclusive to the right-wing. There are left-wing leaders and left-wing countries that have been nationalistic. And there are right-wing countries that have been nationalistic. Nationalistic is independent of which wing you're on. So outside of that, that completely removes all the arguments. And if you have something, post it in the comments or contact me. Let me know what about the Nazis was right wing. The other oh man, it's already 8:15. I've been going on for an hour. There's a couple other examples. The KKK was run by the Democrats, left wing. KKK is left wing. If you look at Richard Spencer and the KKK, what they want is they want socialized health care. They want the government to take care of everything, but they only want the government to take care of white people. That's the only difference between what Democrats are offering and what the KKK want, or what these white nationalists want. White nationalists want all the same thing. They want free college and health care and free stuff from the government, but they just want it for white people. It's like, but those are all the same talk. Like, Democrats right now are promising free college. Democrats right now are promising Medicare for all. Democrats right now are promising all of this free stuff from the government. That's exactly this is not something I'm making up. This is not something that's, if you look at what the core tenets of the KKK and what they want their government to do, it's the exact same thing. The only exception, or the only difference between those two, is that the KKK and white nationalists want those things only for white people. And if you look at the right wing wants none of those. Not only do we not want them for white, or for people who aren't white, we don't want any of those for white people either. We want to lower the government, reduce the government to as small size as possible, because individuals should be taking care of themselves, not the government taking care of individuals. That's the right-wing principle. The KKK defies that. And like I said, the KKK was founded by the Democratic Party. The KKK and all of these white nationalists. This is not something that has changed. This is something that's been the case since forever. There are some right-wingers that the KKK has, supported or sided with. In the case of, David Duke or something like that, endorsed Donald Trump because the policies where Donald Trump was talking about building a secure border, well, that lines up with what the KKK want as far as securing the national border and keeping people so it would reduce immigration, which further goes with their goal of making the U.S. entirely white. But Donald Trump's reasoning for cutting off the illegal immigrants into the border is not because of the color of their skin. It's because they're abusing the system that's in place. They can come in legally, and they can be of a different race and we'll let them in legally. That's what Donald Trump has said. If the white nationalists had their way, it would be anybody could come in illegally, as long as they're white. That's what they would want. They would want open borders for all white people, but since they know that that's not a possibility, they want closed borders so they can only allow in white people. So whether they supported him or not, that's because they aligned on one idea because it would help further their agenda. But if you look at all their other policies, if they had a Democrat candidate that was for a closed border and for all the stuff that a Democrat candidates are currently for, the KKK would endorse them over Donald Trump because more of their policies align with the KKK. Ugh. All right. I've gone on this rant way too long. I was hoping to keep this half an hour because I wanted this to be a shorter segment that people might actually sit through instead of sitting through an hour of me going on this tirade. So, I think I've covered everything that I wanted to say, and I think I'm gonna end with this. What happened over the weekend was an incredible tragedy. The loss of life it's unthinkable and unspeakable. And even though I think both shooters were on the left wing rather than the right wing, and this is clear by the El Paso's, not only, so he was a white supremacist, and that's what people are jumping on and saying he was a right-winger. But if you look at the rest of his tenets, the rest of his policies, he's a super environmentalist, thinks global warming is going to destroy us all. Well, if you talk to right-wingers, they're like, hey, show me the facts. Oh, every example you've shown shows that global warming is this leftist myth, the end of the world type thing. And I'm like, right-wingers look at the facts, look at the arguments, and they're not seeing the evidence for global warming. But this guy is a super environmentalist, kill people in order to save the environment type. That's a left-wing ideology. Forget some of the other things. There was a few other things about the El Paso guy. They're like, wait a minute, that's left-wing. Left-wing. So you're seeing all of these things stacking up left-wing, and then you see, white nationalist, he's a right-winger. But white nationalist isn't right-wing, it's left. But I want to emphasize, because this is a core tenet of what I've just been talking about for an hour, this individual was on the left, but you don't blame the entire left for this crazy person. This was an individual acting, and he alone is responsible for his own individual action. The left isn't responsible. Nancy Pelosi isn't responsible. AOC isn't responsible. No, the guy who did the shooting, the crazy monster who ended all of these lives, he is responsible. He and his alone. And the entire reason they're trying to paint this guy as a crazy right-winger is to condemn everybody on the right. I'm saying he's not on the right wing, but even if he was, you can't judge everybody in this group who fits under this category based on the actions of an individual member. And that's what the left continually tries to do. And that's why I'm like, dude, he's one of yours then. because that's exactly what he was doing. He was looking at an entire group, judging them based on the actions of a few individuals. That's a left-wing thing. I don't judge the left wing or people who are on the left by this individual's actions, because I know there's plenty of people who are on the left who are nonviolent, who live up to principles when it comes to nonviolent and protecting people. I disagree with a lot that the left does. There are a lot of principles that they believe that I say contradict themselves, and I think that is a very flawed ideology overall. And I think it leads to people doing these sorts of actions. So I blame the ideology, not the individuals in that group. I blame the individual shooter for his own actions, but I don't blame anybody else who subscribes to this ideology for that individual's actions. And nobody should. Nobody should judge that group, the individuals who comprise that group. No one should judge the individuals based on him. But you should judge the ideology, the idea, by the individuals who make up that idea. The individuals who hold that idea. If somebody like that can hold the leftist ideology, it's not a good ideology. Because this is one thing, is you would be hard-pressed to find somebody who is extreme right-wing. And what I mean by extreme right-wing, I mean dedicated emphatically to the individual, to the rights that every individual has, to the family unit, to conservative values, to Christian values. You would see that they're incapable, or I guess maybe not incapable, because humans are capable of all kinds of contradictory things. People are incapable of being rational. But somebody who is the embodiment of all of the right-wing ideals would not do that. Somebody who is the epitome of all left-wing ideals, I don't see any reason that would stop them. There's nothing in their core tenets that would prevent them from ending lives in the manner that this man did. Alright, and on that, I'm going to end this, and I'm going to hope, well, it's already almost 8:30. Maybe I will push off the more lightweight stream and do that tomorrow. So I think I'm going to end this here, and maybe tomorrow I'll talk about some of the other topics that are a little more lighthearted. Thanks to anybody who stuck through this to the end, and I will see you next Tuesday.